Okay, we're going to start with two quotes. Obviously, the second one's longer and maybe a little more overwhelming, but they're actually both meaningful. I think the first one is kind of more clever, and the second one is more relevant to us as students, perhaps. Okay, so brevity is the soul of it. So let's see what we can make of this first one. Let me read you up into the context of where this quote falls, kind of help us a little bit, because context is king, always. Okay, so he's just been talking about how if you're going to be a good student, if you're going to be a good, really, orator is what he's talking about. If you're going to be a good public speaker, you have to be a master of yourself. You have to be excellent in virtue. And he has this great line where he says, because most of the things that we know with our students is it's always their lack of virtue that keeps them from overcoming in their studies, which is, yes, that's right. I mean, it's impatience, it's sloth, anyway. And he lists all these things. I mean, it's just great. I mean, this is summer reading for all of us, Institutes of Oratory. But, so he says, if you're going to be a real speaker, you have to not only be kind of knowledgeable about what is good and acting it out, not knowledgeable as a philosopher, but he says, what we know to be true, and I'll kind of read this out. So he's talking about people who are just philosophers in their mind versus people who live it out. So he says this, those who had a reputation for elegant eloquence ceased to study moral philosophy and ethics, and abandoned by the orators, these studies, ethics, became the prey of weaker intellects. As a consequence, certain persons, disdaining the toil of learning to speak well, returned to the task of forming character and establishing rules of life, and kept themselves what is, if we must make a division, the better part of philosophy, but presumptuously laid claim to the sole possession of the title of philosopher, a distinction with neither the greatest generals nor the most famous statesmen and administrators have ever dared to claim for themselves. So he's basically saying what we still feel today, which is there's often like a break that happens between practicing something and being a philosopher about it. I mean, so that's what we say, right? I get the theory of that. I can't actually do it in practice, but I understand it in theory. So that's the distinction that he's just talked about. And then talking about these great generals and people from Rome's history, he then says, facere enim optima quam promittere maluerunt. So let's just look at these 6 words and see what do we notice with our eyes.
There's lots of infinitives.
Good, we have actually, how many infinitives?
2 infinitives
Good.
and a verb.
So we've got, our first infinitive is facere, and our second infinitive is promittere. Oops, sorry, infinitive. All right, and then our third verb is maluerunt, and I'll give you that one. The verb mullo means I prefer. I prefer. And so it's the kind of verb that actually wants a complementary infinitive. Like, I prefer, in English we usually use like a gerund, like I prefer swimming to dancing. And that's the kind of construction we have, because quam is a comparative construction. This to that, or this over that. So, maluerunt, you can see with the nt ending, what's our subject here? They, good. And he's talking about these great generals and these great people of the past, and I'll give it to you, they preferred, it's our past tense, the perfect tense, they preferred facere optima. What do you think optima are?
The best.
The best. And it's a neuter plural. This is that substantival adjective. So it's a neuter accusative plural. They preferred facere optima.
To do the best?
To do the best things, quam, rather than promittere. This one actually comes into the English with an S rather than a T.
Promit?
Than to promise, or to like speak about them. And think of the philosopher. So, enim is what we call a post-positive. Does anyone know what a post-positive is? Post-positive. Post?
After.
Positive.
After a verb?
Think of, it's the opposite of preposition. Preposition. It's postposition. So what happens is, and this is something, as far as I know, peculiar to Greek and Latin, it's a post-positive, and it's almost always these like inferential conjunctions. And so it comes second, but we actually translate it first. For, so he's talking about these generals, for they preferred to do like good deeds, the best deeds,
Rather than to
Promise.
to promise them, i.e. to like say, hey, it's really good to go out and do good things, right? Sounds,
Right.
yeah. So again, when you read them, so here's how our translator, the great version, by the way, this is the low classical version. So here it is. So they preferred the performance. They preferred the performance. He takes the infinitive and makes it a noun. They preferred the performance to the promise of good deeds. Okay? And there actually you can kind of see a really good translator of how, they kind of finagle the Latin a little bit. So they prefer to do good deeds rather than just promise them or just speak about them. It's great. And then he goes on to say, but I am ready to admit that many of the old philosophers inculcated the most excellent principles and practiced what they preach. But in our own day, the name of philosopher has too often been used to mask the worst of vices. All right, so then he skips on and he starts talking about, he really walks up from birth on, and he talks about how really a child's never too young to start to learn their letters and start to learn to read. And actually a really important principle in our schools is sometimes, and I've heard this before, somebody will say, well, why should we start Latin in 3rd grade when we could actually make much more progress if we started it in 7th grade? And that's true, right? I mean, a 3rd grader cannot cover as much as a 7th grader could cover. And he has this great observation of, hey, even if it's only, he doesn't use the fraction, but let's say it's only doing a 4th as much. Let's say it's only doing a 5th as much. We just bought ourselves, 1/5 of time. We bought ourselves 20% into the future. So even if you're going slow, more slowly, then that's okay. Ultimately, that's all right. And of course, the question is, well, what else would you have them be studying? And that's kind of his point also. Like, well, if you're not going to have them reading and learning grammar, and he actually says, I want to look more carefully into this, but he actually says, because they're speakers of Latin, but he says their first language, basically, they should learn Greek. And then come in, and this is what we do, and then walk hand in, he says, Greek and Latin grammar should walk hand in hand, so that their native tongue will not be a foreign tongue. So they won't, i.e., speak Latin with a Greek accent, so to speak. So, anyway, but then he starts talking about his students and how there's a danger that can happen if you're a student and you start learning these things. So let's look at this longer quote. Let me read it first. Nihil est peius iis, qui Paulum aliquid ultra primas litteras progressi, falsum sibi scientiae persuasionem induerunt. So let's just take our eyes and let's just see what we notice.
There's some, they look like derivatives from English.
Okay, what would be some derivatives?
Persuasion.
Yeah, so persuasionem, or persuasio is a, like an opinion, or like an idea, a belief, or something like that.
Scientific belief.
Okay, good. Now here's what's funny is, the word science as we use it, we mean like natural philosophy, right? But scientia is just knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not always, but it's usually head knowledge versus true knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And actually that's kind of what he's playing on here. They have a persuasionem falsum. A false idea
of
knowledge, yeah. So they have a misunderstanding about their understanding, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? What else do we see?
Nihil means nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, so
Nothing.
S means is.
good. So we actually have
Blah, blah, blah.
good. So we actually have a subject, noun, linking verb, predicate, adjective. Nothing is peor. Spanish? Peor? Worse. So this is actually in the neuter form. Nothing is worse, and then A's here is for them, or nothing is worth in them, i.e. in our students, than qui, those who, and it's a plural, I can tell because of I have 2 verbs that are in the plural. So those who, progressi means have progressed.
In letters.
Good, they are ultra primas litteras.
They're ultimate first
They're ultra, actually means beyond.
Oh.
So he kind of bundles up adverbs here. They are Paulum aliquid ultra. They are a little bit, Paulum aliquid means a little bit something beyond. I.e. they're just beyond
They're first letter.
Their first letter. So to catch up, nothing is worse in them, in these students, than those who, or for these students, than those who have gotten a little past, have progressed just a little bit beyond their first letters. Let's say kindergarten or something like that. And they induerunt. Induo literally means to put on, and it's most often used for clothing. They put on, or they, what do they get?
They act
False
like they know a lot.
Yeah, here it is. So they put on a false understanding, and civet means for themselves, or with respect to themselves. So they put on a false idea of knowledge for themselves, or they have a false understanding of their own knowledge. And again, if that doesn't describe students, I mean, there's a neat moment where they really are excited and things, but of course, then there's that moment where you're like, you really don't know anything. If I had $1 for every time a fifth grader tried to correct my Latin, I'm not joking about that either. It's amazing. So he's actually, it's funny, he's actually talking about a slave tutor who, called a pedagogue. Actually, the Holy Spirit's also called a pedagogue, but it's a hard word to translate because the slave tutor is also responsible for kind of basically making sure the student does his homework for, among other things. But anyway, so that these pedagogues who are slaves really, that they get this opinion of themselves that they know all this stuff because they've been attending lessons with the boys and anyway. And so then they try to tutor the boys, but they're not tutors. They are, it's kind of interesting, by the way, if you think about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is a pedagogue. That's what that got me thinking about. Is because the pedagogue's role, according to Quintilian, is not to teach, but actually to keep you in line, so to speak, if I put it that way. And
Maybe it's kind of like the laws of pedagogue.
What?
Maybe it's kind of like the laws of
The laws of pedagogue, right? I mean, anyway, it would be really interesting to see, again, Quintilian's writing right at the time of Paul. So, in Rome. So there's reasonably that they're probably their understanding of a pedagogue is pretty similar. So
Is that where you get pedagogy?
this is where we get pedagogy. Yeah. Pedagogos.
Pedagogy.
Okay. All right. So to last week's assignments, and I apologize, I think I said this already, but the video from last time got lost. So, or didn't record. I don't know what happened. I had a bad hair night, and so I actually canceled the whole thing. It just didn't. Something like that. Not really. All right. Any questions from the homework?
I had a question.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Number 2. Okay.
Oh, maybe I already asked you that.
Was that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Duke May. I think I already asked you.
Okay. Yeah. It's a great question. So number 2 says age yoame. So age is one of these verbs that can have like 70 different translations. Actually, if you look it up in the dictionary, it'll say to lead, to do, to bring about, to whatever. Okay. So age here, age yoame would be something like probably come, help me, or hurry, help me, or anyway. And then dukme. There are 5 if we include some, but usually we just list 4. 2 D's and 2 F's. 4 irregular imperatives. From the verb duco, ducere, we have duke. These are singulars. From the verb dico, dicere, we have deek, tell, or say. From the verb fuckio, fuckere, we have the irregular imperative fuck. And from the verb fero, I carry or I bear, we have fur. So deek, duke, fur, and fuck are the 4. Yeah. We usually don't teach those until like 7th grade, and by then it's just, it's just good time. So, anyway, but they all actually look normal in the plural. So duke almost like goes back to what we would expect. It becomes dukete. Deek becomes deekete. Fuck becomes fuckete. And fur, actually fur is the exception. Sorry, I knew one of them. It's furte. So, Duke lead me to my second son. Is that what it is? I just lost the page. Okay.
I remember I already asked you about that, but sorry.
No worries. Any others? Good question.
How about number 4?
Number 4. Nao pericola populo romano exponam sine mora. Good. This is a very Ciceronian setting here. Okay, sentence here. All right. Let's look at the sentence. What's our verb?
Exponum?
Exponum. Good. And what tense is that verb in? Exponum. It is. So here we have our future active indicative, first person singular. Ace et, amos atis ent. Exponum. I will lay out. There's your mathematical term, exponent, right? To put outside of or to place outside of. Right. So I will lay out. Wait, what's the biblical word? Exposit, actually. Expono, exposui is actually. So exposition is what pastors do.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so I will lay out. What will he lay out? Or what will he kind of put on display, put forth?
Nova pericula.
Good, nova pericola. Those are neuter plural. So these new dangers, or new dangers, the new dangers. And then we've got 2 phrases left. Populo Romano.
To the
People,
Roman
right?
people.
Good, to the Roman people. And then sine mora.
Without delay.
Without delay. Without delay. So I will lay out, or I will, put forward the new dangers to the Roman people without delay. Which I love sentences like that because they delay doing it to say that they'll do it.
Can you do number 13?
Mm-hmm.
Dum in magna.
Same thing, let's look at, we have 2 clauses. So what's the verb in the first clause?
Declamas.
Good, declamas.
Declamas.
Declamas. There we go. Declamas. And then what's the verb in the second clause?
Relego.
Good, relevant. By the way, notice, I just got asked this question over the weekend by a parent, and actually this is kind of important. So the parent said, you say that order doesn't really matter. This is a 3rd grade, 4th grade level sentence. So you say that order doesn't really matter, but I noticed that you always do subject, direct object, verb is the basic structure. I said, yes, that's true, and the reason why I do that is because that's normally what you see in the sentence. So here you can even see how, in number 13, right, they put that verb at the end of the clause. And that kind of signals to the listener's ear.
End of the clause.
Yeah, that's the end of the clause. And then he uses this vocative to break it.
Mi amici.
Mm-hmm.
Or amici? Do you say
Amica, yeah. In Latin, in modern day, they would say amice, but anyway, that's ecclesial Latin. Okay, so the first bit. So dum in magna urbe declamas. This is what we call a temporal clause.
I think I had trouble with that. I looked up and wrote down subjunctive. Why did I do that?
It's not a subjunctive because it's from declamo, declamare. So that A is not the A of a subjunctive. You're not quite to the subjunctive yet.
Why did I write? Is dum in subjunctive?
It could be. Dum could. Oh, that's interesting. Dum can trigger a subjunctive. Here it just means while. So while you were,
In the big city.
yeah, doing what?
Declaiming.
Declaiming. Yeah, what's declaiming?
Criticizing?
Yeah, criticizing. Like literally, like shouting down at or shouting somebody down. Actually, that's probably how it carries into today. You shout them down. So while you were in the city, publicly declaiming someone. There's no someone. Sorry, I shouldn't have added it. My friend, and now we can see the contrast. Relego. I am.
Rereading? Did I miss that?
No, yeah, I'm reading or rereading. Yeah, legere.
In leisure, the writers of the Trojan War.
Good. These are the scriptorum, the writer of the Trojan War. Yeah. So Horace, what's Horace reading?
The author.
The Iliad and Odyssey.
Yeah. So he's reading Homer. So he says, he's Horace is kind of famous for, like saying, I love being away at my country house in leisure. A great poem called Otium, and he's reflecting all the time on leisure versus busyness, and which would you rather have? And so anyway, so yeah, while you're in the big city, criticizing some poor guy, my friend, I am rereading Horace, basically the author of the Trojan War.
That's funny.
Good times. Yeah, pick your day, right? Law or leisure, as it were. All right.
What did you get for number 14? We learn not for life but for school. Is that right?
That's what I got.
Yeah. Kind of depressing,
Is
right?
that the opposite of your mind?
Yeah, it's the opposite, right?
I know. I was like, that's not right, and then I didn't think I could have translated it right. As
Yeah.
soon as I was like, that's not true.
It's funny. It's very old, the criticism of education being a utilitarian.
Pragmatic, yeah.
Yeah, and pragmatic, yeah. That is not new. People going, and again, I'm not picking on any dads. I'm not, even myself, I'll even cover my eyes for myself. But it's like, that's usually a dad question. Well, are you going to make money doing this? Which again, is like, I get that. But anyway. So that's sister. Is that sister? Seneca, sorry. Okay. Let's move on to the new section on pronouns and demonstratives. And we might actually even be able to do 2 chapters today.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. I want to start with actually what Wheelock does last in this chapter. Is he introduces us to the category, very technical name, special ES adjectives. Special ES adjectives.
But is this different than first or second or third declension adjectives?
It is. So these are all pronouns and adjectives and demonstratives that kind of are unique in their own form in some ways that we're going to see. And this name, this moniker, is helpful for us to think about. So we're going to start with this group of adjectives that he calls special ES adjectives, and it's 9. Let me see if I count that. Yeah, that's right. Okay. And they all have to do with numbers or like quantities. And the mnemonic device is unus nauta. And the first one is actually unus, which means, what would you guess?
1.
1. And unus and then the next one is nullus. And nullus means none. So you have 1, none. Then we have ullus, which means any. Right, the opposite of nullus. None. I'll give you none. Okay, I'll take any. Okay. Then you have our Star Wars word, Han.
Solo.
Solus. Which means?
Only.
Do they give you only? Or do they say alone?
Oh, they say both.
They say both, okay.
Yeah.
So alone or only. Pass that along, Galaxy. Did you know because he's a loner, so he's solo? Brilliant. Okay, then we have neuter, neither, neuter,
Ah,
neutra,
no. Because you lose the E. That's why you have to write that.
yes, that's why I wrote that one out too. Then we have alias, which is another kind of any. Let me look in the definition and see if they give it anything slightly different. For alias. Yeah, any. Okay. Other, another. Alias, uter. One of 2. Yeah. Uter, we can actually see most clearly through its related word. Uterque means both of 2, utter means one of two. Or like one of, which of two. That's better, sorry. Totus. What do you think totus is? What?
It's a little dog totus.
Totus, yeah,
Like
Toto.
Toto. You didn't.
You could say Toto is her whole world. It means entire.
Yeah.
So that one does come into English as total.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then last but not least, another good English derivative word, alter.
Like alternate.
Yep, like alternate. And that's, actually this is a good English lesson. An alternate or alternate or alternative means you only had two options, right?
Mhm.
I was alternating between the two lanes. You can't alternate between three lanes. It's like if you only have, if you have two children, Levi's not my oldest, he's my older.
Right.
Because I can't use the superlative if I only have two. Alter is the same way. It's one out of two. Okay. So these are the special eos adjectives, these 9 words that all relate to quantity. One, none, any, alone. Okay. Here's what makes them special, and it's worth kind of looking at the book to see the declension here. On my edition, I have them on page 57. And we'll start, I'll use unus since it's the first one. He uses solus. Yeah, unus he uses, yeah. And you can see we've got our nice masculine, feminine, and neuter nominative singulars. But then what do you notice about the genitives? Genitive singular.
They're all the same.
They're all the same. And what is their form?
Solus, you.
Good. Eos. There it is. Unius. So I'm going to kind of triple highlight this. That is what makes it a special eos adjective. Is that its nominative is going to be the same, but its genitive, and then look at the dative singular. E, right? Soli, soli, soli there. So uni, uni, uni. Its genitives, forms, masculine, feminine, neuter, and its datives, masculine, feminine, and neuter singular, are all identical. So you couldn't, for example, if you said, I am a friend of the one girl, it would be Poeli Unius. Or if you said, I am a friend of the one boy, Pueri Unius. Or I am the friend of that one rock. Forgive me. Okay. So what makes it a special eos, or why we call it a special eos, is because its genitive ends in eos, but then also you're going to see for all of them, the dative is the same. So instead of saying, for example, uno, unai, and uno, you're going to just see uni. But if you look at the declension, you notice everywhere else it goes back to what we would expect. Everywhere else. Okay? So these are the 9 adjectives that fit the special eos pattern. They all in those genitive forms go eos. So let's just walk through them, and we're going to do them in the masculine. So let's go, for example, we're going to go masculine, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. So I'll give you the first one. Unus, unius, uni, unum, uno. So nullus, ready? Nullus, nullius, nulli, nullum, nulla. Okay? Ulus. Ulus, ulius, uli, ulo, ulo. Solus. Solus, solius, soli, solum, solo. Okay, now let's switch to the feminine. So neutra will be our next one.
Okay, so because this is, I thought that was, that was masculine.
Yeah, those are the masculines. So now the feminine. So here we go. Neutra, nutrius, nutri, nutra, nutra. Alias, or alia. Alia, alias, ali, alium, alia.
Hang on, is it alium or alum?
Alium. There is an I still, yeah. So, and actually, look at the masculine one on alias. Notice it'll go alias, alias.
I got the 2 I.
So the second one, yeah, is going to have the long I. Alias, alias, alias. Okay. Let's do it in the feminine, utra. So, utra, sorry, I should have rewritten that with the E-L. Utra, utrius, utri, utrum, utra. And let's do 2 last ones neuter, so totem. Totem, totius, toti, totem, toto. And last but not least, alterum, alterum. Alterum, alterius, alteri, alterum, altera.
Now, how do you know it's not, how do you know you don't drop the E there?
That one, I think I just memorized the form. Yeah.
But you drop it with the ooter, but you don't drop it
You
with the
do,
alter.
yeah. I need to rewrite that. That's a mistake on my part. It was one of those ones where as soon as I started to say it, I was like, oh no, hold on, that drops out. Okay. So there we go.
Oops.
Okay. So the first thing in lesson 9 is just this idea that we have these adjectives that deal with quantities, and they decline with just those 2 peculiar places. Okay? Just the genitive, eos, and the dative, e. Okay? Let's go on to pronouns and demonstratives.
But these are sort of like third declension adjectives, right? Sort of.
How so?
Because, like, the us, well, they sort of mix. Like, the us, is sort of like first and second declension, and then the eos is kind of like third declension.
No, because it's just us.
I know, but it's sort of the same.
No. Those are all second and first. You're going to get your opportunity right now to look at third. Okay?
Those are all first and second.
Those are all first and second, yep. Okay. So, because we listed them, us, right? All of them had an us, form, right? Okay. Now we're going to look at pronouns. So flip now kind of backwards to the beginning. He starts with what we're called demonstratives.
So these are all first and second declension adjectives, but they're special.
Special eos, that's right.
Okay.
So you really can't say those are first and second, but they just have those 2 weird forms. Okay. All right. Now we're going to look at demonstratives. First of all, what is a demonstrative? Think of the word demonstrative.
It points to something.
Yeah, so demonstratives you really are only able to use when you can reference something. So we could have this and that, right? This near this chair, hike silla versus that chair, illa silla, over there, that one. Okay? And as we look at these demonstratives and these pronouns, what we're going to see is they're not special eos adjectives, but if we look at their declension, we're going to see that in common. Okay, so I'm going to take illa, the masculine, far demonstrative first. Okay. And we can kind of see. Illa, Ilius, Illy, Illum, Illo.
So those are the same forms as the special use adjectives.
Yeah. And again, I don't know, I never asked them, but why doesn't he include this? Probably because he just calls it a demonstrative. But yeah, you could really look at illa, illa, illud and say, wait a second, that's just a special eos demonstrative. Yeah. And that's why they're all in the same chapter. Okay. So otherwise it looks just like we would expect it to look. With maybe the exception being that nominative short e. But otherwise, yeah, it looks pretty normal as far as a second declension or first declension.
And the ud thing.
In the ud, yeah. Okay. So that's the far demonstrative, or as I often call it in when I'm first teaching it, is I call it the flipper. And I remember my 5th graders had a question. I remember you had this question, Rose. But here's how this is most often used in Latin: is it flips a subject and an object. So, for example, if we saw puer colonum iuvat ille laetus est. A simple sentence. Right. The boy helps the farmer. He is happy. And the question is, who is the he? And in English, we kind of can't tell because we have a couple competing rules. Think in English, what's one rule that we have for how I could tell what a pronoun's antecedent is?
It's closest.
Yeah, so there's one rule that would say, the boy helps the farmer. He, because the farmer's the closest, the farmer. But then we have another rule as well, which is carry your subject forward. Right? So the boy helps the farmer. He goes to the store. He then, da-da-da. And you kind of have to pick up, oh, this is the boy doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, okay? So we kind of have conflicting rules that come up in English grammar. And one of the things that Latin does, and then blesses us in our English, is it has us use, I call it the flipper, but it's oftentimes more just the former. So what it does is it takes a noun, it takes a noun, that was, in this case, it was an accusative direct object. And it flips it and makes it our subject. Okay? We do something similar if we said something like, I used to love to bike and run, but the former has gotten tiresome. Something like that. Where you can use the latter and the former. So it's kind of something similar to that it does. So that's where it's I find most often used is to flip in the course of a narrative if you have a subject to direct object. Okay? So that's we call it the far demonstrative, that one, he. And it often, by the way, just works as a pronoun. So this is the tricky thing. When somebody says, well, Latin doesn't have pronouns, specifically third-person pronouns. Latin has 5 different words it uses for third-person pronouns, depending on what the author. Sometimes they'll use ille. He, ille bonus vires. He is a good man. But anyway. So, okay. The near demonstrative is a great little football word. The masculine is hick, the feminine is hike, the neuter is hawk. Which sounds like how when we were boys we used to imagine football players sounding. Hick, hike, hawk! Sorry. They don't get any better than that. Okay. So again, here if I take the masculine, hick, oops, red and black. Hick, and then look at that genitive form. Good luck. Well, you don't have to say it, but do you see it? H-U-I-U-S. Huius. So this is the sometimes diphthong, half diphthong, ui. Ui, like chewy, ui, something like that. So huius. But notice this one's not long. This one's not long. And then the dative, again, not exactly the same, but you still see that I, and you see that it's the same for the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. Hick, hike, hawk, huius, huick, huick. But then it stays a little funky. Hunk, hawk, hoke, hawk, hoke. But then the plurals look pretty normal. He, hodum, he's, hos, he's.
So the neuter for the far look different.
Illud. Does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the rest of them sort of look like the right. Like
Yeah. Yeah, the neuter look a little bit,
wonky, but just in the singular.
Yeah, just in the singular. But huius, or I should say, hick, hike, hawk, the near demonstrative, this man, hick, huia. It looks a little more strange. So that one's kind of worth, you'll see, for example, you'll see a form hoke, and you almost mentally need to drop off that final C. Because if you saw ho, you'd go, oh, that looks like an ablative singular ending. You know what I mean? Hunk, not exactly it. Hunk, that's the feminine. Honk, that's the masculine. But again, if you drop that C, you go U-N-A-N. That's kind of close to U-M.
But
They're
the
both,
hook up at the top and the neuter doesn't have a thingy over it, though, right?
In the ablative, it does.
It's an ablative.
Yeah, but not hawk. You're right. Not the neuter. Not okay. So those are declensions you just have to memorize, and usually it's just starting to see them in context, where you go, oh, that's right. That's this man versus that man. But again, this is another word that Latin authors use as a pronoun, basically. Hick, this man. He really is how they sometimes use it.
What about like ad hoc?
Yeah, ad hoc. What is that? It's a fallacy where you do what?
Attack the person.
Actually, that's ad hominem.
Okay.
to the man. Ad hoc is like if you're going through life and you're kind of scattered, and so as you deal with an issue, you just deal with things ad hoc, which means literally to this thing, like, oh, this thing now, and then this thing. We call it ADD nowadays, but that's kind of the idea is ad hoc
To
rather
this,
than literally to this, like this thing now, and now this thing, and now so ad hoc, not the way to run really anything. I don't think. Maybe an emergency service type thing, but otherwise, okay. Otherwise, they do give you a comment on usage and translation, but I actually want to look forward to chapter 10, just because we've actually done this before, but I want to give us an opportunity to kind of practice this a little bit. And we've got this perfect time. So in chapter 10, when Wheelock teaches conjugations, which I really love this, he's kind of constantly reinforcing, not always, but generally speaking, there are ways that first and second conjugation verbs do things, and then there are ways that third and fourth conjugation verbs do things. Okay, some of those things, again, are the same, some of them are not.
And these are the array.
Yeah, so let's talk about that first. So when we say first and second conjugation, what we mean with first conjugation is verbs that end in
ARE.
long A-R-E, good. So
How do you say array?
are, good. So, for example, laboro, lavorare, good. Long A, I'll kind of triple emphasize. That's our key. Second conjugation verbs. Ere, good, with a long E. So, I admonish or I warn, moneo, manere. Long E tells me. Third, and here we have to kind of break it into, I think he calls them third regular. That's fine. But we have third regular and third I stems. And then fourth. So, all third conjugation verbs have what in common?
ERE.
The short E-R-E. So, for example,
Weak E.
I rule, yes, weak E. I rule is rego, regere. Short E. The I stem, we'll use the verb, he actually does a mini section on this verb in the chapter. I capture or I seize, capio, capere. So this is one of those things that I just can't emphasize enough. So let's look at how we read this verb. Rego, regere. Okay, so I see it and I go, oh, wait a second. I see that weak E. And then, here again, I see that weak E, capio, capere. But I always have to ask a second question, which is, if I see that weak E, third conjugation, then I have to go back and ask a second question. Is there an I before the O? No, then it's a regular, non-I stem. If there is an I, then it's an I stem. Okay?
And you just know that by memorizing it.
That's right. So this is where, you do just have to memorize those vocabulary forms. So capio, cupio, fugio, faccio. Okay? All right. And then fourth conjugation. What highlights the fourth? How do I know if something's a fourth?
Is it the I?
It is a long I. Good. So, audio, audire. Audire. Long I. Okay. And notice to your question about memorizing, look, if we don't memorize both forms, we can see audio and think, oh, third I stem. We could see capio and think, oh, fourth. We could see rego and think, first. We could see laboro and think, third regular. So really we need both pieces of that puzzle to know where it fits in, okay? All right, let's look at then how to build all these in the present, the imperfect, and the future. And we'll call that a night. So let's review. For our present, and these are present active indicatives. That's all we're working with. We're not working with passives yet. We're not working with subjunctives. We're not working with any of that stuff yet. So present active and indicative. What am I going to add to, or how am I going to build the present of laboro, laborare?
Laboro.
2 steps.
Oh, drop the RA and add an O macron.
Good, so I've got laboro, but I'm going to get my stem, chop off the RE, so labora. So let's say stem plus,
O.
good, O, mus, tis, nt, right? Moneo, manere, how am I going to build it?
E-O.
Yeah, moneo, and then, but the same thing, right? I'm going to go chop that infinitive, get that present stem plus endings. Same ending. Okay, now here's the change, and this is why I love that he lays it out this way. Here it gets weird, because I have that weak E. He can barely kind of hang on and stay with it. So this weak E can't hang out. So he's going to drop. And I can see he's completely dropped, rego. So here's the change. And I'm just going to write out this conjugation because I think it's more helpful. So I can see that it's rego. And then let's imagine we had to do R-E-G-S, regs. That sounds more German than it does Latin. So what happens is that little I comes in, if you remember, reges. Not a long I, just a little I.
Regit.
Regit, good.
Regimus.
Regimus.
Regitus.
Regitis.
Unt.
And regunt, good. So that's
I have
the-
it written down, that's how I
Good, that's the other big change, is that unt, okay? So for third and fourth conjugations, and I'll write this really big. For third and fourth, unt. That's the
But
big
does the third
change.
have e-unt? I mean, the fourth have e-unt though, not unt.
It will have the I, but it won't be long. So it'll be audiunt.
E-unt.
Okay? So I'm not going to repeat all of these, but this one has an I stem with an unt. So cupio, cupis, cupit, cupimus, cupitis, cupiunt. There's that unt again.
But the fourth conjugation has an I.
It does have the long I. So audio, and then we get our stem, audis, audit, audimus, auditis, audiunt. Audiunt. Okay. The imperfect. You all know your song, bye bye, imperfect sheep, have you anything more? Yes. You don't know your song? Okay, ba 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 ba. Okay, so when we do the imperfect, we build off of the stem. Okay, first conjugation stems are going to end in what vowel?
A.
Long A, good. So I'm going to put stem, and I'm going to put that long A, because it's got to end. So labora plus
Bomb.
ba plus
Ending.
the endings MST or mst, mus, tis, nt. Final M, final T, and NT, ND anywhere kill macarons. So it becomes bum, bos, but, bomus, batis, bunt. Second conjugation, stem ending in,
E.
good, long E. So put that. Plus, ba, plus MST mustism. Or mst mustism. Same thing. So let me just make it clear. Laborabam, laborabas, laborabat, laborabamos, laborabates, laborabant. Manebam, manebas, manebat, manebamos, manebates, manebant. Okay. Third conjugation, regular. Stem ending in
E.
long E, good. And then bombas, bot, bombas, bot is bond. Third conjugation, I stem, stem ending in,
Consonant?
it's actually EA. So, cupiebum, cupiebas, cupiebat.
Take it that off.
That's new. That's what's new in this chapter.
Oh, can
Okay.
I ask you, is it really a stem long E
Mhm.
for the third conjugation?
It is. So it would be regebum,
I had that
regebas.
written down and then you had it written up there, but that doesn't seem right. because
Yeah,
there's no-
and actually, and feel good about this. This is actually the new, kind of new for him. We've talked about this a little bit, but that's what's new in chapter 10.
So it is
It
Ebon,
is.
Ebas, Ebat,
Regebum, Yeah, abum. And then here, cupiebum, cupiebas, cupiebas.
So all it is for the
Cupiebums.
I stem is it adds the I in.
That's exactly right. And then fourth, same thing. The stem ends in IE also. Audiebum, audiebas, audiebat, audiebamus,
So for the
audiebat.
future, like the weak E thing sort of just goes away.
Yes, it does. It does. And
That's
that's
the past, sorry.
yeah, no, yeah. So let's wrap it up with the future. We'll go a little over, but that's okay. Okay. So this is where I was just working with students, high school students on Friday, and they still mess this up. Okay. First and second conjugations. What are the future endings? Bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. Okay? So again, it's that present stem, labora, bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. Mane, bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. So I'm just going to put that stem, that present stem, plus bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. And then the biggest change is with the third and fourth. They look really nothing like each other. So the stem here is going to be reg. It's a consonant stem. It's a regular stem. There is an exception or two, but anyway, it's almost always a consonant. So it's going to be the stem, which could be a consonant stem, or it could be an I stem. And again, we would have an I here also. So that stem, and I'll just write the stem. So reg plus, or cupe plus, or aude. Oops, and actually that's going to get shortened by the endings. We'll see. And the endings are, in honor of J.R.R. Tolkien, ace, et, amos, atis. There they are, the ends. So regum, reges, reget. Regemus, regetus, regent. Cupium, cupies, cupiet. Cupiemus, cupietus, cupiet. Audium, audies, audiet. Audiemus, audietus, audient. Okay? What is up on the board right now is what we call the present system. And the reason why we call it the present system is that it's built, you can see that they're all built off of these present forms. The exception kind of being the imperfect, which gets, an I there, but otherwise, it's all this present stem. Long A, long E, consonant, I, long I. Okay? And the reason why it's important to think, okay, this is the present stem. The building blocks are these laboro, laborare, is because soon, I can't remember if it's next chapter or not, we're going to get into the perfect system. And the nice thing about the perfect system is conjugation doesn't matter at all.
What is perfect? If imperfect is past, perfect is
So it's a whole other group of past tenses.
past.
Yeah, and one future past tense, which we'll talk about what that means. We've got to understand Einstein if we're talking about verb tense, which is kind of cool. Okay, so that's the present system as a whole. Since you had talked about when it happens, present happens now, imperfect happens in the past, but how?
Continuing.
Continuous, and that's what it means, imperfect, not completed. So I was walking, versus the perfect,
I walked.
I walked. It's viewed as being a completed action from how the speaker says it. And then a future, usually incomplete action. I will go. Okay? Let's leave that up there for Mrs. Griffin in the morning, so she just, I'll say that's what the first graders are.
First grader's going to freak out.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.
Well done.